Yay, okay. So now I'm fully recording, which is perfect. Hi everyone. Hope everyone's doing okay. Feel free to chat in the chat box as well if you have anything to say, because I'm not too sure how I made the settings. I believe, because I know I always feel strange sometimes if like the video is just always on. So I think I set everything to off, but if anyone wants to like speak or say something, feel free, and I can try to go in and like put your video on, or we can talk in the chat box, because I know that there's a few people who are going to just be watching the recording, which is really, really cool. So I'm also just going to hop in and share my screen because I'm going to look at some of my documents. Hey, Amira, hope you're doing good. And then we're going to look at a few things just so like I know I always do well when there's a little bit like something else to look at on the screen, like a lecture or something, just so people don't have to look at my face the whole time. But so what's really cool is now it's the Scorpio new moon, so it's a really good time to kind of just dive into astrology and start thinking a little bit deeper about personal development. Depending on what time zone you're in, it's either like right now or tomorrow morning is when the moon hits its fullest extent. The ephemeris I have, I keep on forgetting that it's Pacific time, or it's the or where the median is in England, so it's like Greenwich time, and I always have to do math and subtract a few hours to get it to my location if I'm using the ephemeris. But yeah, so that's pretty interesting. I just want to make sure I get the chat box up on, I guess, well, if I'm sharing my screen, I can't actually see the chat box. So I will answer any questions later, but Amira, I know your signs. If Sarah, if you want to hop in and put in your signs, I can talk about those a little bit more specifically when I go back to the chat box. But yeah, anyways, so we're going to be talking about the sun, moon, and rising signs in astrology. And so I actually have a little bit of a workbook to kind of show you guys as well. Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Great signs. Always good. So this is actually a little workbook. I'll scroll up a little bit so you guys can see it. It's a workbook I created on actually getting to know your sun, moon, and rising a little bit better, just a little bit more of like self-reflection to really talk about how they all work. So I'll share some of my insights today, obviously, but I won't really go into like the life coaching part of it, which is me talking about how it helps you acknowledge and accept certain things about yourself. Well, maybe I will actually, but yeah, so it's all just about a deeper dive into your 3 signs. So I'm just using that as a starting point to look at when we talk about the signs individually. So I'm just going to summarize like the sun, moon, and rising and what they mean, and then I'm going to talk about each zodiac sign and how they differ from sun, moon, and rising. So sun signs are basically everyone's starting point for astrology. Everyone is familiar with sun signs. Like most popular astrology is like look at your sun sign in the horoscopes in the newspaper, and that's your horoscope. That's how a lot of people grew up with astrology and how it became really popular in the modern times anyway. So the sun sign actually acts as more of a general filter for your life. So it's a really good starting point when you're doing a natal chart reading to connect everything to that basic energy of the sun sign. And the sun sign usually, because the sun is the closest star to the earth, so that's also where we get that idea that this is the most powerful influence or most powerful energy over your life. So the sun sign acts as that general filter where you gain your perspective and opinions over other things. And sometimes the sun sign, a lot of people are like, I don't believe in astrology because I don't resonate with my sun sign. But they could also, one, not be familiar with certain aspects of that sign and how it could actually work with them, or two, be just resonating more with one of their other main signs. And that's totally okay, because some people do go like a while without really feeling their sun sign, and that also is why I love astrology and love getting to know astrology, because it reminds you of certain things you need to pay attention to, certain aspects of yourself that you might have been like neglecting earlier on in your life. Like if I was like, my sun sign's a Leo, and say I grew up in a really weird environment where I wasn't able to shine and wasn't able to people didn't pay attention to me, of course I wouldn't resonate with a Leo sign, because I was always told not to do that stuff. So that's where astrology can be a little funky, and why some people choose that they don't believe it, or choose that they don't resonate with their certain signs, because of like the outer influence on everything. But yeah, so overall, sun sign is that filter. It's important because it also resonates with your general like good traits and bad traits. And the key word here is general, because they are just things about yourself that almost are manipulated by your other placements and stuff. So it's a really great tool to use as, again, like I said, as a starting point. So then we're going to hop into the moon sign, and then the rising sign is really interesting when we contrast it to the sun sign as well. So these are also some questions. I don't know if anyone has like a notebook out, but some questions that I like to tell people when they're reflecting on their sun sign is, what are your overall like life goals and outlook? Like the very like basic things about yourself. What are they? And so for me, I'm a Leo, and it's like, I want to be liked. I want to be loud and heard, and like given credit for the work I do. Like it says right here as an example, like those are just general goals and general outlooks on my life that are fed through my sun sign. So that's a really good like question. And then also like paying attention to events that have happened in the past, that like it's really good to always identify a moment and be like, that was a very sun sign moment. So you can start to identify when you're acting out of your sun sign's energy, is also just a really good practice to have, because then as you live your life, you'll be able to tell the difference of when you're acting throughout whatever sign's energies you have. And then it just helps you get more in tune with who you are, but also it helps you learn astrology and help teach other people astrology too, when you learn more about yourself and your own astrology. Another question for the sun sign is, how does it show up in your day-to-day life through decisions you make? And this can sometimes be really hard, because again, some people might be more influenced by their moon or their rising sign in their day-to-day life, but it's a great question to reflect on, because you might start realizing how often you do act out of your sun sign. So the moon sign. So the moon sign is probably my favorite sign, and it's actually really funny because I'm a Scorpio moon. So this Scorpio new moon is kind of like a rebirth of my emotional cycle right now. So there's a lot to reflect on for me, and I like got really grumpy today, like a Scorpio. I kind of shut down a little bit and was just not feeling good. And that's another thing with Scorpio, since we're here talking about the moon, Scorpio has this lesson in it to make you uncomfortable so you can actually like get to the information and identify things or self-reflect. So if you're feeling that, this is a good time for you to do that. So after this webinar, taking a look at your signs and maybe learning or going through these reflection questions could be a really great tool. But yeah, Scorpio, the moon, yeah, it's been insane. I'm like dying. But talking about astrology is like, it gives me energy. So thank you for joining, because I love talking about astrology. So I'm like, so that's what gives me joy. And that's through, in a cool way, this ties into my 3 signs, because I'm talking about astrology, which is my Pisces rising kind of element. And then I'm like talking and teaching people, being out there, Leo. And that is kind of healing the Scorpio moon, like sadness and things that are bogging me down today. But overall for the Scorpio moon, like the biggest lesson that this next cycle is to have those moments of consideration and not really making any decisions. Like I sat there today being like, oh, should I buy this thing? Should I like And the answer was just like, no, why do you need these things? Scorpio's in my 8th house. So so for me, the Scorpio lesson is very much, it brings up stuff and kind of gets you trying to go back into bad habits or bad thought processes. And this is the time where, because Mercury goes retrograde in a few days, you know not to make any decisions. You know not to act too irrationally. It's all about consideration and reflection, this Scorpio new moon. Sometimes it's not as emphasized as like reflection and stuff, but the rest of the planets this time around are saying it's very much hermit mode, not a whole lot of action. If you do have to act, make sure you have that like quiet time and time to think things through. But yeah, so that's my little aside about the new moon today. But your moon sign in general represents that emotional body. So having a water moon is really emotional for people. But the moon sign, so your secret self as well. So another way that it shows up is ways that you don't recognize, or things. For another personal example for me to explain is, my family always called me moody. And I'd be like, what do you mean? I'm not moody. And it took people to identify me that way, to be like, oh, wait, and I am that way. It's kind of a secret though, because I don't identify that way. I don't actually think that's part of who I am. So sometimes it can show up in that, where it takes a while throughout your life. You'll realize that as you identify more and more with your emotions, as you get to know your emotions more and have more experience with your emotions, you'll start to realize how the moon sign does help you identify with yourself, or is accurate to who you are. So it represents your emotional body, how you react to things as well. And often I like to describe it as who you are when you're alone too. So the sun sign is nice and bright and shiny, and it's who you project onto the world. And then your moon signs, your inner self, it's maybe those other helps you understand how you talk to yourself or think internally, how you process things. So it's a really important sign to really get to know, especially if it contrasts to your sun or rising sign a lot. It's because you might not resonate with it a lot, and then that creates a lot of internal conflict and anxiety and all those things that can make you feel out of balance if you don't give your moon sign enough attention and enough space. So so that's kind of my thought process on it. And yeah, I say it right here. It helps you understand where your emotions are coming from and how your reactive brain thinks, and how you can work with these patterns to communicate more effectively. So when people started telling me I was moody, I had to start catching myself in those moody moments and be like, wait, do I have to just tell someone I'm having a moody moment so then they don't get offended? Or do I have to maybe pretend to be happy, like just so people, you know what I mean? Like I started to identify things and had to understand how I could actually say what I wanted to say without coming off as a moody bitch, because that's Scorpio for you. But yeah, it was very intense. It was a very intense experience. So your moon sign, super important to tune into. And I just had a thought, but I'll talk about it later, because I was going to talk about having when your sun and moon are sometimes the same, and we'll talk about what the difference is if you have two of the signs the same zodiac sign, or two of the planets the same zodiac sign. But some reflection questions for your moon sign that would probably be great to do on a new moon is describing your emotional body to yourself. How do you see your emotions? And or even like personal examples, like what has your mom or your siblings or anyone like that mentioned about your emotions, and writing that down and giving that a little bit of consideration. And how do they show up in your daily life? Like, how often do I react? How often do I make decisions based off of my emotions? I actually had a really fun revelation about this myself. I was like, I cry at least once a month. And it's usually based on authority issues. And so that's one thing that I've identified that I have to kind of work through now and be like, okay, where is this coming from? What's the limiting belief behind it? Can I stop crying at work? You know what I mean? It's very interesting to give yourself time to look at those things in your life. But yeah, so how often do they influence the goals of my sun sign? So this is where you start to talk about how this relates to your sun sign and how they start to either work together or start contrasting each other. So that's a really important thing to consider as well. And how do you currently deal with your emotions? How do you, is there something you want to do differently? Are you dealing with your emotions badly? Because that's really important to always come back to as well. And it changes from moment to moment or like month to month, that you might have a really good time dealing with your emotions one month, but then the next it can be a little like intense, a little overwhelming when new situations come up. So your rising sign now. So your rising sign is actually not a planet, but we treat it the same as a planet because it's just a mathematical point. It's where the sun was rising over the horizon at the, or no, where the, sorry, the point that the horizon was at the time of your birth. So, and that's why time and location is also really important when casting a natal chart. So your rising sign, the best way, the way that helped me understand the rising sign the best was when someone described it as a brand. So your rising sign represents how people objectively see you and kind of how you construct yourself to the world. So this is where it can get confusing between the sun and the rising sign. So this will probably answer your Instagram question, Amira, is what I'm trying to do anyway, is where the sun is who you project just naturally and effortlessly, although it's also your generalized goals and outlook. So that's the more personal side of the sun sign. Your rising sign is who you put out there in the world. And sometimes it can be subconsciously as well. But as you grow up and tune into your rising sign, it becomes your brand, and you kind of start actively putting yourself out that way. My best example is myself. I'm a Pisces rising. So previously to my major transit that just happened with Saturn, so like every 7 years you kind of go through a big cycle. So but previously to those cycles, how did my rising sign show up? What was I showing a Pisces rising? And people would always see me in ways that are identified with Pisces rising. So being a little bit kind of go with the flow, easygoing, but also a little like erratic and flustered. Those are kind of ways, like simple ways that it would show up. But now that I have grown up a little bit and know a little bit more about who I am, I'm actively putting out my rising sign, which is like doing astrology is very Pisces rising, and being seen as like a spiritual, a helpful, compassionate human being is very Pisces rising. So I'm like, it's not like that I want to say that it changes throughout your life because as you grow, you start to realize your rising sign a little bit more. And then it kind of gets activated into you actively putting it out there, actively creating that Instagram persona, for example, that people get to see, and you chose that they get to see that side of you, is what your rising sign kind of is. Where a lot of people have a hard time differentiating it between the sun and the differentiating rising and sun apart is because they do act in very similar ways, where they are things you project and put out into the world. Where your moon sign is really easy to differentiate from because it's an internal thing. So your rising sign works very similar to the sun sign, and that's why they're two of the most important signs in the zodiac. Some astrologers actually write through the rising sign because that also identifies where your first house is. And so so you can create a clearer and a more accurate like horoscope for people when you look at your rising sign. So next time you read horoscopes, read your sun and rising sign, and the rising sign might be a little bit more accurate because it is working with your proper house placements as well. Oh no. I wanted to get to there we go, the chats. Yeah, so yeah, your rising sign can definitely kind of have a big like checkpoint where it's just what's more important to you right now, especially if you're dealing with a certain perfection year or just a certain focus on like things like career or friendships, like anything that's kind of more social and creative. Your rising sign does tend to like take a bigger importance because it rules what you put out there and how you let people see you. So that's really important. So I hope that cleared things up. I know it's always kind of funny because these lines kind of blur, but I'm going to show a diagram soon, and it's the triangle of you is what I call it, where all of these signs do work really well together. And the sun and the rising especially blend into one another and create this certain energy that, like, when you compare your sun and rising together, they create that energy that is uniquely yourself. Well, all three of them too, but so did I write anything else crazy here? So yeah, so this is where in the workbook I talk about, this is like the point where you can start comparing and contrasting all three of your signs and even see how those signs have similarities or differences and then how they work out in your life. So that's a really important exercise to do. So the rising sign reflection questions are: how do you want the world to see you? How do you let it influence your actions and decisions? And then this is a question that I had throughout the other three. So then you're able to see how in different ways all your signs influence you. And again, how do they compare and contrast? So all very important questions. And then my workbook has a little bit of information or just like time to reflect on how to bring it all together. And you guys can get this workbook too. It's only $10 if you wanted me to send you the document, but it's pretty fun. Or give it to someone for, I guess it's not Christmas yet. It's not Christmas yet. But yeah, so I hope that cleared anything up. Feel free to ask more questions about that, but I'm going to be talking about the signs specifically now. And so I just have this up right now to just for us to remember the sun, overall direction and outlook, moon, emotional body, secret self, rising sign, your brand, and how people see you objectively. So, and then this is the triangle of you drawing that I always have. And the triangle of you, I'm actually really proud of explaining astrology in this way, because this is actually something that it was a big point in my personal perception of astrology, where I realized that I was having like original ideas and being able to explain them in like my own way. So that's just a fun fact about me. So Aries, we'll start with Aries. Aries as a sun sign is ruled by fire. So first of all, Aries is a fire sign and it rules the first house. So that's also really important. So Aries, having an Aries sun embodies kind of like the immediate energy of Aries, being initiative, wanting to start new projects, being loud, almost like literally like a fireball being shot somewhere, just like fresh out of the gate, like really fast-paced energy is what Aries is about. And with the sun, your overall direction and outlook on life in Aries would also be similar to that, wanting to bring energy to every situation, maybe being a little bit impatient because you want to get things started and wanting to get things going. An Aries sun would also probably have a lot of maybe even be like quick to anger, or could be that kind of person who is like maybe petty, I want to say sometimes, or just is willing to have an argument with you because they have that direct fiery energy, because they are a cardinal sign, which just makes them like a punch in the face a little bit. Yeah. But with a moon sign, with having your moon sign in Aries, this can be pretty intense. This because Aries again can be very opinionated. Yay. Yeah, your moon sign is pretty accurate. So your moon sign, or Amira, do you mean your moon sign in a way that it like does your moon sign influence who you put out there a whole lot? Because that's interesting to me, because I know sometimes I'm like, can I be Scorpio for a second? Because I still don't like to show my Scorpio side. So people who actually act through their moon sign, or when we identify those moments where we're acting through our moon sign, I love it. It's super important. But anyways, oh, you were raised by 2 Aries suns. Is this accurate? Because Aries suns to me are super powerful and intimidating. Being a Leo sun, I'm almost always going head to head with Aries because we're both fire signs. So I always like have a little bit more of a tense thing with Aries, but they can be super friendly people at the same time. So I don't know if I also mentioned that in the sun sign, but they're usually very sociable. With the moon sign being in Aries, this creates some difference actually. So the moon sign being in Aries, you react when people maybe argue with you, one, or when you're stuck in a situation, because Aries love to start new things, have new projects, and have this constant excitement, where with the moon sign, if you don't have that, that can trigger your emotional body and get you a little bit more restless, a little bit more upset. So to feed your moon sign, to feed your emotional body, you would have to maybe start a new project or have some kind of like creative outlet where you are constantly creating something and getting something going to balance out that that energy, because Aries can be quite intense. And Amira, are you a Aries? No, you're Libra Pisces, right? Because I know Libra is opposite to Aries, but I forget if that was in your signs or not. I think you're just Libra Pisces. But yeah, that's perfect. But yeah, so Aries moon, super important to keep things going, and you can get frustrated when you're stuck in a situation. I've done a lot of like reading and listening to podcasts where most people with Aries moons also have a hard time maybe staying in relationships as much. So if you have an Aries moon, you'd really need to be stimulated all the time by your partner and like excited by whatever kind of emotional support they have with you, or like constantly doing new things with that person and stuff like that. An Aries rising, usually like one way that they could I thought so. I knew you were just Libra and Pisces, but it's because Aries is so opposite to you. So that's really cool that your parents are Aries. Very interesting. So with Aries risings, it's really interesting because depending on their other placements, they could be like, oh my God, they're the person that you are probably often like, wow, I thought you were like either super intimidating before I met you. And that usually happens with different fire signs. But with an Aries rising, it's maybe they put off this exterior of being excited when really they could be nervous inside, or being like the go-to person, but depending on their other placements, maybe they can't handle it. An Aries rising would be seen as everything that the sun sign is, but that doesn't mean that they actually hold that outlook as true in themselves. So another aspect of Aries rising would be that like friendly and initiative like side to them, but then or also like the bad side of Aries, people could also think that they're kind of like what's it called, like bitch facey, but really they're the sweetest person you've ever met. So an Aries rising could kind of represent themselves in that way. But when you're approaching the rising from your brand, so if you already knew like, hey, I'm an Aries rising, how can I use this to represent myself? It would be tuning into that louder part, being able to speak in front of people or make sure your voice is heard, being like a project manager and having projects started is a really like Aries rising thing to do, because you like being busy. Aries people like being busy and like having new things on the go, but also kind of like getting to know a little bit about different things, which is similar to Gemini, but yeah, it's similar to Gemini. So for Tauruses, Taurus suns are an earth sign. So this is very different energy to the fiery sign of Aries. So earth signs are just more down to earth, of course, but more easygoing and materialistic. So not always materialistic in like the bad way, but just things are important to them. So an Aries sun is, I love Tauruses. They're one of my favorite signs of the zodiac, but they're very practical minded, very what's it called, sensible, and treat people nicely. Basically, Tauruses, their overall direction would be that to be like resourceful and create stability for people. So that would also go under the things of like being financially stable, having a nice home, stuff like that would be their general outlook, and direction in their life would be to achieve those things. And so that's really important. With Tauruses, it's mainly, I'm just trying not to like overspeak because I want to go into more examples and talk about the houses, but I can't talk about the houses in this webinar because I'm going to do it in another webinar, but also it would just take too long. But yeah, so to sum up for Taurus sun is their overall direction and outlook in life would be to be financially stable, to create stability and comfort throughout their life or the lives of others. Then with a Taurus moon, this means that their emotional body kind of relies on those things. As an emotional person, they would probably get more comfort from their home, is where they would like really go to experience those emotions. And then Sarah, what were your signs? Okay, perfect. So Gemini's coming up soon. So Taurus moons would be also that kind of person who would probably support other people when they're emotional as well. And I find that Taurus moons are one of the signs, or most earth moons, to be honest, are the signs that their moon sign can kind of be shown a little bit more, because they, as earth signs, they want to nurture other people, so they have a tendency to be emotional people and check in with their friends' emotions as well, which is really interesting. So so that's Taurus moon. There, as a Taurus risings are really cool. I actually just met a Taurus rising, and people, she was always saying that people see her as more materialistic right off the bat, which is a really interesting way for people to see a Taurus rising, or it's just like the obvious way, but because I have a bias towards Tauruses, because I'm like, they're the best sign ever, I don't always want to see them as like materialistic right away, like in the bad sense of materialistic. But it's so true that people are like, wow, this girl has nice clothes, this girl is fit, like and that's very Taurus rising, like coming off as you have your shit together and live a balanced, productive life. And this girl is really great, but it's really funny because Taurus rising also has this people will think that you did that for yourself. You know what I mean? A Taurus rising is also a worker because it is an earth sign. So it wants all these things, so it works for it. But at this point in this Taurus rising's life that I know, like her clothes come from her like parents and stuff like that. So it's like, oh, I can't wait to see her grow into her Taurus rising in her future. But that's also just an example of how the rising can come off, because some people might think like, oh, this person must be like a really good student, must like be a hard worker because they've got all these things going for them. And then again, depending on their sun, moon, and rising signs, that could be the total opposite, but they're just coming off that way because either that was like the cards that were dealt with them, or because those things are important to them to represent themselves, and their rising sign is showing because of what they put out, if that makes sense. So Geminis. So I believe, Sarah, you're a Gemini sun. I have a Gemini suns everywhere. It's crazy. Like my boyfriend's a Gemini sun, and he shares the same birthday as my mom. And then my brother has double Gemini, but he's an Aquarius sun, but his other signs are Gemini. And all of my really best friends have been Gemini. So Geminis are great, but they're also a little crazy. And that's why I like them. But so anyways, so Gemini suns are very mental people. So ruled by Mercury. So just a little heads up, the Mercury retrograde in Scorpio isn't too badly positioned to your sign, but it will definitely be a good time to kind of like take some time out and chill. But so having a Gemini sun, as you know, people love to know little bits and pieces about everything. The best way someone described to me a Gemini sun, or maybe I read it in one of my astrology books, was a hummingbird, like going from flower to flower, tasting a little bit of everything. And I find that Gemini suns usually do that as well, like always wanting to constantly intake information, learn more about things, and be able to tell people about it and have conversations with people and like share their insight or learn from other people. And that's really awesome. So Gemini suns, their overall outlook would be that kind of like mental energy, like utilizing your brain is just the best way I can see it. Like or intaking information is one of like is a direction that Gemini people would have, but also being very communicative and charismatic. As an air sign, that's kind of what rules Geminis. Air is the element of talking and of learning and of thinking. So they can be very cerebral people, always thinking about new things. Sometimes meditation can be really hard for Geminis because sometimes they just can't shut off their brain. So so again, sun for overall direction for Geminis, it's very focused on this idea of intaking information and communicating with people and sometimes creating relationships. It's not always like the be all end all, but like presenting themselves and being good at doing something creative or with their words. With a Gemini moon, things are different. So you'd see with a Gemini moon, you can see how the need to get information is transferred over into their emotional body. So before they can make a decision, Gemini moons would have to have a little bit more information about all the facts before they can be like, okay, I'm upset about this. They'd want to have a little bit more in like, or sometimes even talk about it. Or if they're like, oh, I'm sad about this, they might like Google depression or you know what I mean? Or like Google something and try to like learn more about their problems instead of self-reflecting. So Gemini moons can have a hard time reflecting. And that's what would be the difference in having your signs. Because if you're a Gemini sun and your moon could be better at processing emotions, which would make you a whole different type of Gemini. But having a Gemini moon itself is a little bit more restrictive to clear decisiveness when it comes to emotions. You need to talk it through. You need a little bit more information when you're a Gemini moon. With a Gemini rising, this is kind of interesting because like the hummingbird analogy, I can never really pin down what a Gemini rising is like. Like, again, like they can be all over the place talking about different topics at once, but how does that mean? But the part I struggle with when identifying Gemini rising is how do they want to be represented as? Because I can identify the weird things that they would do when you have a Gemini rising, like talking about different topics, being a creative person, and stuff like that. So, but it's like, because Geminis are so busy in their mind, I'm always asking, but are they actively representing themselves this way? And so my brother is a Gemini. Oh my gosh, he's a Gemini moon and rising, so this helps me get to know him a little bit better. But so it's really interesting to think about Gemini rising. So if you guys meet any Gemini risings and you can identify it, let me know. But the way that they like textbookly, that's not a word, but if I was reading a textbook, they would describe Gemini rising as someone who represents themselves as a creative person, maybe has a few projects on the go, maybe wants to like write or be a poet, be an artist or something like that, Gemini rising really has that creativity part of the overall outlook of Gemini and turns that into who they are, like turns that more into how they represent themselves, is like a creative. Or if it's not creative, it's probably someone who's like working a lot and putting out reports and stuff like that. With Cancer, with a Cancer sun, this is also an interesting one because it is a water sign, and water signs are very emotional, and Cancer is actually ruled by the moon. So when we get to the Cancer sun signs, the moon is still a really important planet for them, or really it's still really prominent. So the Cancer suns would still have an emotional side to them right away, and their overall outlook would be kind of like emotional stability or an understanding of emotions is one of their main themes, and then family and kind of like intimacy is it, and like intimacy in a way where it's just like being close with people, and is really important to Cancer suns. So those are kind of like their overall directions. Cancer also really likes to be grounded, so that's why family is important, but it can also be like the home, and being just like structured and stable is really important for Cancers. So how that having a Cancer moon is almost like, well, having a Cancer sun is almost like having a Cancer moon, because Cancer is ruled by the moon. So there's already that little tidbit in there that is going to make you more of an emotional person, a little bit more in tune with your emotions and the emotions of others. But when people just have a Cancer moon, for example, it kind of just magnifies Cancer in its truest form, because Cancer is ruled by the moon, but really, again, just emphasizing the need to understand your emotional body and the emotional body of others. Probably things with home and family would be the things that maybe make you the most emotional with the Cancer moon. Like if things are like family drama would really rattle you or be important to you, where people who don't have a Cancer moon, like I don't have a Cancer moon, so when something's going on with my family and they're living far away, I'm like, oh, like I'll call them up, but like I don't let it ruin my day. But Cancer moons would take that to heart and would want to like really help that person who's close to them and stuff like that. But so that's another way. Cancer moons can never really be a super secret part. Maybe they can, depending again on the other signs, but Cancer moons really have a way of coming out in terms of people, when people show their emotions. But the other side of Cancer, like I said in the beginning of this webinar, I was talking about how some people don't know all the sides of zodiac signs. Another side of the Cancer side is it can either go like down the emotional spectrum or down the moody spectrum, which is still part of the emotional theme of Cancer, but Cancers can also choose to represent their emotions in a way that just secludes themselves. That's why they're the crab, where they can just go into their shell and retreat. So sometimes Cancers, so I take that back. Sometimes Cancers will be good at showing their secret self if they're embodying that retreating side of Cancer, not really willing to share much personally because they're afraid of getting hurt and stuff like that, or not really willing to share that shit is going on with them because it's affecting them so much that they don't want to talk about it. So those are kind of the two ways that Cancer can really show up. And yeah, the more I think about it now, this is also just like another random theory I have, is that every sign that is ruled by an even number house has more of a duality to them. So that's just a random random aside that I've been trying to like think about and study. So maybe I'll do another webinar on that one day once I do a bit more research. But okay, so Leo suns are kind of crazy too, but that's just because I'm in the middle of some self-reflection. But Leo suns overall are ruled by kind of being like an entertainer, like wanting to be present and make people laugh, make people feel joy. And that's why that other side of Leo, or like a popular perspective, is that they are prideful or vain is because they want to be seen as well. So those kind of things like flow into each other. So their overall direction would be to be outgoing, to be like center stage, but also to be generous. There's like a generous theme with Leo, again being like Leo being like the king of the jungle. There's a reason. It's because they want to help support other people in like a lighthearted way and in a fun way. So that's another thing, because sometimes people, there was this older book on astrology I read where people were talking about how Leos make great leaders, but then leaders get a bad rep because sometimes they can turn into dictators. Sometimes they're tyrannical and like do bad things. And that's, again, another point of why the sun, moon, and rising sun are so important, because that influences how that Leo sun ruler treated their people. So Leos aren't always tyrannical leaders. So when you have a Leo moon, sometimes you can react if you're not getting that attention, if you're not getting the opportunity to share yourself with other people, that will rattle your emotional body, because to balance out your emotions, you need to feel loved, or you need to feel that that presence and kind of like performance, like I was saying, with having a Leo placement. So for sun's like overall outlook for Leo is that presence and outgoing personality, but also that leadership and kind of like vanity goes along with Leo, as well as, so transferring that to your emotional body is going to be that need to process your emotions through connecting with people and having that opportunity to perform or represent yourself truly. But also your moon sign, sometimes Leo moons are probably the most optimistic moons, though. They don't tend to let anything really bug them, unless it's stuff like not getting any attention or being able to like present themselves in a certain way. But with the moon sign, with having a moon in Leo, again, it would depend on what house it falls in a person's chart, but the Leo is also the zodiac sign of like fun and creativity. So a Leo moon is probably the most likely person to take any emotional thing and turn it into a masterpiece painting or something like that, and turn it into something joyful, or when they're feeling down, do something fun instead, is very much what a Leo moon would be. With a Leo rising, usually Leo rising and Leo suns have great hair. I'm not too sure about the moon signs yet. I haven't really met a whole lot of Leo moons, but Leo rising would also, so using your rising sign as your brand, you may represent yourself as someone who is a little bit more outgoing than you maybe were before or are naturally, or maybe just a little bit more loud. Maybe you're actually more intellectual, but you represent yourself as more of a loud, like presence who things just roll off the tongue, but really you've done your homework and are, or that's just an example. So having Leo as a rising sign would have people think that you just like exude confidence, and maybe, again, like maybe you speak loudly when you're in front of people or something like that. But there is this tendency to represent yourself in maybe a larger way than you actually feel, depending on your other signs. It'd be interesting to meet people with 2 Leos, because that could be like a whole lot of energy. But yeah, another way that Leo risings would come out is just people seeing you as super friendly too. And maybe you are actually like, wait, actually back away from me. Like, I didn't ask for this information or this type of intimacy right now, because Leo risings can also just attract people to them, because Leo is ruled by the sun. So people are attracted to the sun because they're bright, shining stars. It's very much that, where Leo rising, people can't get enough of Leo personalities because they're warm and cozy. So having a Leo rising adds that on to yourself, and and so it really does attract people to you. And does that feel accurate to your, because you're Leo rising, Sarah? So let me know. But yeah, so that's another example of how it is similar to a sun sign, but the difference would be that that it turns into maybe something that you have to actively think about, and it could not, or I guess in both ways, whether it's your sun or moon sign, there's always something going on when you're like, but I also enjoy this, which is the exact opposite of that sign. But because I know, just talking about Leo, I know I have those moments, but then I need to retreat. Okay, yay. But yeah, Leos are a good time. Leos, another thing is, or no, I talked about like the creative edge of Leo, which is also important. So for Virgo signs, if anyone has friends who are Virgos, like, they are blessed souls. I used to think that they were really rude, which is funny, but really they're really kind people. So for a Virgo sun, Virgos are ruled by Mercury's. Yes, that is true. The attention from others for Leo is very important. So again, that could be shown through your rising sign too. Like if yay, okay, awesome. So another example for maybe a Leo rising would be like an Instagram influencer or something. That would be an example of someone's Leo rising coming out, or having just because we're talking about branding, and Instagram is a great way to brand. Sometimes they talk about your rising sign as your Instagram profile, and a great example of representing yourself is through your Instagram profile, so you can compare that to your rising sign too. But yeah, wanting the attention from others is very much a Leo thing, so you're right. Yay, Virgos. So having a sun in Virgo is really nice. They're mutable signs, but they're ruled by Earth as well, and ruled by Mercury. So so you can tell your brother that this Mercury retrograde, you might be feeling some stuff. But again, like, just needs to take a step back and chill out, because it's going to be a interesting one. So having a sun in Virgo, you're ruled by an overall outlook of kind of service to others in some way. And because Virgo, like, I'm not a Virgo, I always had trouble with this. And so through observing other Virgos, it's like maybe they're in the customer service industry, or becoming a nurse, or doing something out of the idea that it's gonna help other people. So even like producing music for people to enjoy, the way they approach that could be through their Virgo sun wanting to serve someone in some way. So that being like the overall direction of their life is to serve, but also to just have like a structured routine, to be like organized sometimes, like in a certain way. Like, they can still be messy, but some Virgos are very organized and a little bit more analytical. Also, health can be very important to Virgos in different ways. So whether that's like creating nourishing food for your family to eat, or having a structured lifestyle, can be shown through Virgos. And again, it's really interesting to watch those themes as people grow, because just the way the world works, like, some people can take fitness and health more seriously throughout their life. So that's always interesting to watch a Virgo's journey through those different tools to create like a healthy lifestyle. But Virgos emotionally are interesting because they can so Virgo moons usually tend to get emotional if they feel like people don't want them there, like they don't want their service. So sometimes Virgos in general, but also Virgo moons, would be the people who maybe are more likely to be like, oh, I didn't want to bug you, like, or, oh, I thought you were mad at me, because they have a tendency to pick up on maybe like vibes and will want to leave you alone rather than feel like they're overstepping or being annoying. Because sometimes they can, because they want to help people, they want to ask all those questions, they want to serve you, they want to be able to like be that person that you can go to. But again, depending on there's other signs and your signs, they would be afraid of overstepping their boundaries. So that's pretty interesting. But with the Virgo's emotional as a moon sign, this could be someone who has those feelings or who is secretly very analytical and a little bit more of a perfectionist. And through that, when things aren't perfect, that can like make them really upset. As a Virgo rising, people will kind of come off as like the mother of the group, or yeah, again, represent themselves as someone with a very healthy lifestyle and good routine. And that may be true, that may not be true with Virgos. So Libras, now I'm getting thirsty because I'm talking so much, and I'm wearing this big sweater. That's always my mistake. I always wear big sweaters and get really sweaty when I'm sitting here doing webinars. So Libras are, and while we're on the topic of Virgo and Libra are also really interesting because they represent that halfway point in the zodiac cycle. So it's the 6th house and the 7th house we're dealing with here. So the Virgo represents this ending between like the bottom hemisphere of the astrology wheel. Houses 1 to 6 are more earthly and more down here, but 7 to 12 represent some bigger ideals that are more more outward, not as I don't know, like the topics that we've talked about so far are very much involved with the self, like your creativity or like or stuff like that. But Libra is really that one that starts taking things outward, and things can be, or Virgo and Libra start taking those things outward and start relating them to other people. And that's a whole other thing when I talk about houses, but it's still worth mentioning when talking about the signs. So Libra's big thing in popular astrology is their like the overall outlook and focus on relationships with people. And this could be either romantic relationships or partnerships. So I know a lot of Libras in my life have very good business partnerships and are really good at like having a buddy at work or like a business partner that they get along with. But again, it could be a major focus in Libra's life could be romantic relationships, like being flirtatious and charismatic and showing that, or again, like Amira said in the chats earlier, the other side of that Libra-ness is, or I guess something that works together, is balance and justice, making sure everything's fair, making sure other people are looked after too. So that's where the partnership kind of comes in, is yeah, you have a relationship with people, or like relationships are the general focus of Libra, but they take it a step further in making sure there's fairness and balance between give and take between each person in that relationship, or from themselves and the people they're dealing with in general. So that's really important. So having Libra Sun, the overall direction would be this theme of relationships and balance. Again, with the imagery of Libra, it is the scales. I think someone might just be wanting a link to this. Okay, it wasn't. Because I had an Instagram thing. And I asked people if they wanted to join. So with a Libra moon, however, the emotional body, again, your emotions can come from this need to create balance. So when things are out of balance, you won't be feeling okay emotionally. You'll need to kind of like reset yourself, or always having like a day to just clean or restructure your schedule, or like having a day to just feel more balanced is probably really important with a Libra moon. But their emotions can also be ruled by that sense of balance or by the relationships with other people. So that is really hard. It's really hard to be a Libra moon because you can tend to take things people do to heart, because you might be thinking more about them than they think about you, since you are ruled by this general since your emotional body is ruled by this general ideal for relationships and balance, and that's really important to you. I was getting it confused because I know I know Amira has a sun and moon, so in Libra. So that's kind of how you can differentiate them. If you didn't have both signs in Libra, you would like the sun would be the overall direction being partnerships and balance, and then the moon would be how your emotional body kind of relies on those things. And maybe on the outside, if you just had a Libra moon, you wouldn't be seen as someone who would care so much about maybe the way other people think about you or how your relationships turn out. But really, if your moon sign's in Libra, those are kind of things that really affect your mental and emotional state and are important to you. With a Libra rising, you would kind of be seen probably as a flirt as a Libra rising, because people are just attracted to your charm. That's another thing, like, to generalize. So wait, yeah, because you're a Pisces moon, right, Amira? Because I always get confused with other readings I've done, because I've done a lot of readings for Libras lately, and it's crazy how okay, perfect. And it's crazy how some Libras that are in like our age group, like around like early 1990s, have double Libra. It's really cool to see. It's really wild. But okay, yeah. So yeah, because Libra moon, because that's why I was getting tripped up a bit, because I was saying these things and I'm like, wait, have I said this to Amira? And it's because you're not a Libra moon. Okay, perfect. So anyways, so having a Libra rising, people are probably attracted to charm and your charisma, and like representing that on as your brand would probably be also visually appealing, because Libra is ruled by Venus. So another big thing, and that's kind of where people get the relationship aspect of Libra, but in a way they're similar to Taurus, where they also like nice material items, like a good aesthetic, like stuff like that is very Libra. So a Libra rising person would probably also be seen as someone who is put together, attractive, like stuff like that as well. So moving on to Scorpio, and this is kind of cool to pay attention to, because then you might have some insight about the energy that we're dealing with for most of November, as we're in Scorpio season now. So Scorpio is another water sign, and so the moon is like rules water signs, but Scorpio itself is traditionally ruled by Mars and Pluto. So it has a really intense combination of energies. That's emotion, action, and transformation. So if that doesn't embody what this moon's about, then I don't know what else to say. Like, it's a lot. So having a sun in Scorpio is very interesting, because it's a bit of a more darker planet. So having something project, it's a hard energy to project. Not a lot of people can pin down like, oh, you're a Scorpio. I don't know if you can, but I know I can't. Yes, I love it. So Scorpio suns have are very, very different actually. But the overall direction of Scorpio suns would be this idea of investigation actually. And I say investigation because Scorpios like to find more information about things. They're like, I kind of call them the librarian of the zodiac, where they have so many experiences throughout their lives, and are able to, okay, I love that. But yeah, because Scorpios have so much going on. So what I was saying before is Scorpios have this tendency to take an experience and really experience it and kind of transmute it into something more, I always say, because they are ruled by the 8th house of transformation. So on a basic level, Scorpios are said to rule more taboo things, so more mysterious things like sex and money. And that's why a lot of people are like, oh, Scorpios are like this sexy, mysterious sign. And that can be true, but what really changed my perspective of Scorpios was meeting an asexual Scorpio, where they were so upset with astrology. They didn't believe in astrology because they represented their sign in this way. And so I was like, well, Scorpio is so much more than this like moody, sexy energy. It is the core of that moodiness, and this idea of like sex and money is actually taking those things, topics like sex and money that are created by society, and understanding the meaning of them, and maybe being a little bit rebellious, and overcoming those taboos, or like what's it called, not perceptions, or just going against the grain, doing what's unexpected of you. And the core of that is this ability for Scorpios to identify something and investigate it and transmute it into something more, like I was saying before. So with the sun in Scorpio, there's often this like outlook of being misunderstood sometimes, whether that's through your family, through the world, through people at work. There's somewhere there it's like I'm misunderstood. Sometimes, depending on, again, how they transmute it. And then the overall direction would be to discover, to find out more in some way. Having a Scorpio moon can make you a little bit more withdrawn as well. Again, just because you might be a little bit more in your head, wanting to figure out things. It's very like, because I'm a Scorpio moon, so withdrawing, but sometimes it's not necessarily always so moody. Sometimes it is, like younger me was, but also maybe using your imagination and wanting to discover more, and wanting to find out more is what can rule your emotional body. So you really need to understand your own emotions and the emotions of others to feel good emotionally. So having those kind of like emotional talks might be important to you, or might just be something that like has to happen for you to feel okay. A Scorpio moon, again, can also, just have that moody side to them, but overall still being ruled by these ideals of Scorpio to try to uncover more information, and probably has like a sexy, moody side to them as well, in a fun way. With a Scorpio rising, this almost like, because I keep on thinking about Instagram profiles, would probably be an Instagram page that is a little bit darker and edgy, and that's like a classic Scorpio example of like how a rising sign would come off as. But again, this is another rising sign that people might see as like bitch face, or someone who is just a little intimidating, and maybe like intimidating in that they know more than you and know kind of like a secret. Yeah, because Scorpio moons, it's really interesting, because I know for me, like a lot of my Scorpio moon stuff is still secret, because Scorpios are secretive. They're, when I said that they were like the librarians of the zodiac, I thought immediately of secret libraries and knowing things that no one gets to reveal. So having a moon in Scorpio does keep a lot of things secret. So he could also be like having these Scorpio tendencies that are just in his mind, because sometimes it's things that you don't want to share with people. Like if it's like sexual stuff, or also like if you're investigating something and knowing more about something, you don't want to tell everyone and be seen as kind of like, oh, what the hell is this person thinking? They're wrong. That's a way that my Scorpio moon when I understood more astrology and stuff like that. And I kept a lot of it to myself until I like was hit with another wave of something where I wanted to like put it out more, because Scorpio does tend to have that secret element to it and withdrawn element to it, where like, you have to wait for things to come out. Oh yeah, because caps can be caps are interesting. Well, we'll get to Capricorn soon, but yeah, because if he's a cap with a Scorpio, that's very because it's earth and water, so it'll definitely take a lot to get to that water moon. but yeah, another way to see like Scorpio rising would be like, maybe you think someone is is secretive as well, or is withdrawn when really they're not. That they, a Scorpio rising, just to finish up Scorpio, would be that kind of person who maybe puts on like a facade to not get hurt, or like oh, what's that TV character? There's so many TV characters that are like people who people think are like rude, but like Rosa Diaz from Brooklyn Nine-Nine is one. Or yeah, like a harsh exterior would be what a way that a Scorpio rising could come out. Another softer side to that, because I don't want to just stick to like the harsh side of Scorpio, would be again someone who's just a little bit more quiet and withdrawn. Okay, so what time are we at? Oh my god, I've been talking for an hour, but okay, so if you guys have to go, I totally understand. I'll still send the recording out, but I'm just going to go through these last 4 signs, and it's going to be fun. So feel free to, again, ask any questions so I can answer them quickly when I'm done. But okay, so Sagittarius suns are very interesting. They're another sign ruled by fire. So far we talked about Aries and Leo that were fire signs, but Sagittarius's fire is a little bit more of like a cool simmer kind of fire, where it's already a little bit more controlled, and it's like a wise fire. So they're ruled by Jupiter, which is one of the further planets that are a little bit further out. So they have, and like I was saying before, where we're moving from this place of earthliness and like personal level to like an outer level, Sagittarius really starts to represent this idea of zodiac signs and people coming into more of an understanding of the universe. So Sagittariuses are usually very optimistic, usually have this need to explore as well. So where Scorpios were more like investigative and wanting to find things, Sagittarius would, instead of reading a book, Sagittarius goes out and finds it themselves and has their own experience and own story to tell. So with a Sagittarius sun, you would probably be more energetic, like optimistic and adventurous are like the main themes of Sagittarius suns. With a Sagittarius moon, your emotional body can be a little bit like, this is what people would probably call a stunted emotional body, because sometimes you're just like, oh, I don't care. Like being a little bit savage, like maybe breaking up with someone, like or not being as emotionally hurt by breaking up with someone is an example of some Sagittarius people that I've seen. Or having your emotions be ruled by this need for independence and adventure. So you want to have those things. So if something's keeping you from being independent and having an adventure, then your emotional body is going to be like, what the hell? Like, what? This is a mess. And then you have to realize that and kind of make decisions based on that. But Sagittarius moons are very willing to explore, but they're still very independent people. So emotionally, they might not want to share their emotions with people. They can be a little bit more private with their emotions, is really what that would show. With a Sagittarius rising, again, it can you might represent yourself as like an outgoing kind of person, a little bit more like maybe a little flirty in a way Sagittarius has come off of, or intellectual. But depending on your other signs, you could actually be a homebody, but like when you go out, you just like to represent yourself as someone who kills it with that kind of lifestyle or something. Because Sagittarius, the 9th house is really adventurous. So having it in your rising sign could, depending again on your other signs, could represent this need to have adventure, to like create your own journey. Sagittarius risings would also be very much like those kind of people who are enthusiastic and like almost motivational speakers is kind of what a Sagittarius rising comes off as, where they're motivating other people to do things, but are they, depending on their signs, but are they doing them themselves still? I hope that makes sense. Because I'm not going to go too much into it. But Capricorn, so Capricorn suns, very, very interesting people. I just have 2 Capricorns in my life who are doing some interesting stuff, so it's really funny to see. But Capricorn is an earth sign, but the imagery of it is the goat fish. So I always find this really important to tell people, because a lot of Capricorns act through their earth and goat side, which is stubborn and a little bit more like organized, structured. Like, goats are also, I guess, like patient too. But then the fish side of it is really important to consider with Capricorns, because a lot of Capricorns forget that they are emotional beings and deserve to cry, deserve a rest, like, or something, because the fish side of the imagery of the Capricorn symbol represents this tremendous ability for Capricorns to understand people's emotions and have an intuition to Capricorns that isn't widely recognized. So Capricorns are like ambitious people, and like are always recognized for being being ambitious and structured and sometimes cutthroat and stubborn. But there's another side to them that is a true representation of earth energy and feeling connected to the people around them. And that is something that is forgotten. So why they're seen as ambitious is because they're ruled by Saturn and the 10th house, which is like career and stuff like that. So with a Capricorn sun, you are most likely to have like a certain ambition, whether that be in career life, or ambitious in your hobbies, ambitious in your like family ideals. Anywhere, ambition is definitely going to be there. But then I think there's also this idea of public service as well, and that's where the emotion like fish part of the Capricorn can come in. So ambition and public service are general themes of Capricorn, along with everything I just said. With a Capricorn moon, it's interesting because, again, there's this weird like tug of war between the practical side and the emotional side of yourself. So Capricorn moons can be very confused because they need to balance, they need to tune into their emotional side. And the Capricorn, like the stubborn, ambitious side of Capricorn might negate some emotional things, because emotions aren't always logical, aren't always organized, and that kind of fights the major ideals of Capricorn. So Capricorn moons can basically be a little hard to understand because they need to understand themselves first. Things that can set off a Capricorn moon would be things like if things aren't organized your way, if things aren't, if things aren't, going your way, or if you're just like maybe not climbing up your career ladder fast enough. Those things can really frustrate a Capricorn moon. With a Capricorn rising, again, you might be seen as this ambitious kind of person, and again seen as someone who may be a little bit more hard to deal with, and people might not want to approach you or might not want to cross you. But again, depending on your other signs, you could be really approachable and really easy to work with. But you might come off as, you might have that kind of like stronger, more organized structure, definitely a leader. Overall, Capricorn's a great leader, but Capricorn rising would really kind of always be that person to take over the group projects and stuff like that, because you're kind of like the most, or people at least would look to you to be organized and to maybe help people figure out their problems, is a thing. And I guess that can go with Capricorn sun and moons as well, is because of your sense of organization. People would probably ask you for help a little bit, or just like be like, hey, what do you think? Because I know my one Capricorn friend really puts things into different perspectives because she thinks so logically. So whether you're, because you're a Capricorn moon, right, Sarah? So you might experience that on the emotional side, where you think through emotions logically, so you could give really good advice, like objective advice to your friends when they're coming to you with an emotional problem. Because that's how I approach my Capricorn sun friend with my problems, like not emotional, but like more like work stuff or whatever, and she'll come to me with really great advice just from an objective perspective, because she's so organized and so able to communicate those things. So Capricorn people are really great for advice because they're very structured and they will like to help structured people. Yeah, I love it. Awesome. So, and so now Aquarius and Pisces are the last two signs of the zodiac, and this is where things can get a little bit more spiritually or a little bit more abstract in terms of identifying their overall directions. So Aquarius is an alien on the planet Earth. Like, they are that's the best way to describe them. Yeah. More dreamy. I love it. So Aquarius, my favorite analogy for Aquarius is someone who, almost like the host, if you've read that book by Stephanie Meyer, someone who is actually embodying like a spirit from a different planet, and they're living as a human, and it's harder for them to understand some things in a way. Like, it's just they're more observant, they ask more questions because they don't really understand everything, because they're fighting like the things that society has put down on us. So if people are acting through pathology, so acting through just like social constructs that have just been there for forever, Aquarius is usually the first sign to question that and to be like, wait, why are you doing that? Like, who told you to do that? Do we have to do that? They're very much that kind of person. And that's why sometimes they feel misunderstood, because they feel like they can't really connect to anyone. That's getting really deep into Aquarius, but it is important to note because their overall kind of direction in life is this certain independence and this certain rebelliousness or revolutionary ideals in their life, wanting to maybe go against the grain, like being someone who is involved in protesting, or being like an advocate for a cause, or things like that would be very important to Aquariuses. But even like some Aquariuses I know aren't like super big advocates, but just on a mundane level, they question those things and ask why people think the way they think and stuff like that. So independent, inquisitive, and like rebellious, but not rebellious in like a cool rebel way, but in like a why do we have to do that way. With an Aquarius moon, again being ruled by, so Aquarius is ruled by air, and I was talking about this back when we talked about Gemini, but being creative is really important with air signs. The other air sign is where is it? Is Libra, of course. Okay. So Aquarius is like, its moon sign would resonate with, again, creating something or being able to talk about these things is really important to Aquariuses. So having an Aquarius moon would be representing talking through your emotions, being able to ask those questions. And like I have one friend who's an Aquarius moon, and she talks about things that have happened months ago because she's still working through those processes, because she just needs to talk it through, and that helps her understand her emotions more. And that's because, again, she's questioning, oh, why would that person do that? Or why does this happen? Or isn't it weird that this is how life is? Scorpio moons are also very big, like, people watchers, where they just like observe and are content observing. But so in terms of like the emotional body of someone, or if you have an Aquarius moon, your emotional body would be ruled by this inquisitiveness and questioning. So sometimes that can be a lot, because you're going to be questioning everything, so you could create anxiety for yourself, and it can be pretty intense. Aquarius moons, another way, or just by questioning things and being okay with it too, depending again on your other signs. It's very very intense mentally and vocally. If you're talking about your emotions, or if you're thinking about your emotions, having Aquarius moon is very intense in terms of always having those things on your mind. Having an Aquarius rising is interesting. A lot of people, one of my astrologer friends is like, I can always identify an Aquarius rising because they might dress differently. They might be those people who are actually like rebels, like back in the 80s and 90s, like the goth people or like the emo people. Like that is how my astrologer friend identifies Aquarius risings, which is kind of funny because they rebel against social norms in terms of how they appear, which is exactly what an Aquarius rising would do. So rebelling against social norms, or an Aquarius rising would also be maybe someone who is just more of a loner, and initially you might just be like, oh, that person wants to just be left alone. Yeah, so that's ways an Aquarius can show up. For Pisces, a Pisces sun, so Pisces in general, kind of because it's the last sign of the zodiac, it embodies kind of everything in the zodiac. So Pisces, and that's why a Pisces can be very confusing, because sometimes they're like deciding one thing and then going with another. I know I'm a Pisces rising, so sometimes I embody full Pisces when I can't make a decision, or like rearrange my schedule, and I'm kind of like not necessarily flaky. Some Pisces can be flaky, but a little bit too like all over the place. So so that's just like because Pisces are embodying all these crazy energies. But the overall energies of Pisces, again, because they're a water sign, emotion is a big thing, but in a compassionate way, because they feel the energies of other people. They feel the energies of like the universe around them, because again, they're embodying all those signs that have came before them. But so compassionate and empathetic is like a major Pisces thing. But again, with all this passion and with all this experience they have through the other sense, they're very creative and what's it called? Because not as creative. Some Pisces aren't like an art form creative, but imaginative. Like thinking about ways to help people, thinking about like daydreaming and stuff like that can be very Pisces. So having a sun in Pisces would create those major overall directions, being like compassionate towards other people and like those connections. Also having like maybe a more emotional outlook on life. Yes, I'm forever daydreaming too, and I think that's my Pisces rising, because I always used to just dream up stuff in the car, and then people would think I was moody because I'm a Sorpio, but really I was just daydreaming. So Pisces people are very compassionate, again, a little bit more go with the flow, very much fish and water energy. With a Pisces moon, again, these are probably people who would space out a little bit more, I want to say. Oh yeah, so do you space out, Amira? Because I guess like daydreaming, yeah. And so a Pisces moon is very much someone who kind of just can escape on their own, and maybe that's how they process their emotions, is through going into their little daydreamy world, and processing things through their own way, through dealing with their imaginations or anything like that. But also on an emotional level, like because they are a water sign, Pisces do have a lot of emotion, and that can show up in, again, different ways, because Pisces embodies the zodiac. So it can show up in like anger, or just like general like discomfort. Pisces moons don't always react emotionally by crying like say a Cancer would, but Pisces usually do have a filter of emotion where through their like connections with people, because they are those compassionate the compassionate sign of the zodiac, they do feel other people's pain on other, or discomfort or sadness or happiness on some level as well. Yeah, okay, I love that, Amira. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Pisces, I would totally understand needing a good cry, or just time to let your emotion out is important. And so some Pisces moons might do that in front of people. A Pisces rising brands themselves, like, I guess what I was getting at with the Pisces moon was that they're intuitive. Pisces moons can take on information and understand other people's emotions. And Pisces risings would brand themselves as intuitive people, and it's because they are. But when I say rising signs, it's not always like how you brand yourself, but it's like a fake version of you. You do have that power on some level, for sure. Anyways, so Pisces rising people would kind of brand them as intuitive people. People would maybe just see them as someone who would understand them and like give them compassion. Like me as a Pisces rising, a lot of people are always like, oh, Sarah, let me tell you my problems. And then as my Scorpio moon, internally, I'm like, I don't want to deal with anyone's problems. But my Pisces rising and my Leo sun makes me seem as an approachable person to like deal with those things. And sometimes, depending on my mood, I'm like so willing to do that. When it's an astrology client, I'm like, yeah, tell me about all your issues. But when it's just a random person from work, or when I was in customer service, people used to tell me their problems all the time, because a Pisces rising can come off as that kind of super compassionate person. Or again, on a spiritual level, like being seen with crystals, doing other things that are representative of connection with the universe is also a very Pisces rising thing. So, and then that brings us to the end of all the signs. I can't believe, well, I guess I just expected myself to talk faster, but I think I did towards the end. But does anyone have any questions before I leave? But thanks so much for joining me, you two. I'm so happy. My last recording, I actually didn't have anyone on, but I still like gave the lecture and was going to send out the recording. But then I realized that it's so much more fun when there's people who have questions or I'm actually talking to, because it also makes it a lot longer. But yeah, if no one has any questions, then yeah, thanks for joining me. And then I'll be sending out this recording to everyone. So thank you for watching this recording, people. Thanks, Amira. I'm so happy you joined. It means so much. And then yeah, if any of you guys want this book, let me know. No problem, Sarah. I hope it helps you guys. Let me know if you guys even use this to help read your friends' charts and stuff like that. But okay, so I will log off now, and then I'll send the recording out even for you to like write more notes and stuff like that. Happy new moon. If I can shut this off.